Well, yes, I'm coming to you late today, and believe it or not, mermaid water. My day off, I'm a mermaid. Yeah. Believe it or not, I had actually started filming this at like 8:30 this morning, and I didn't get it out simply because there was a snafu that happened today. I was participating in Harrisburg Pride. Harrisburg has their Pride celebration a month after Pride is ending. Pride month is June, and Harrisburg always has theirs at the end of July. I don't know why, but they do. And apparently there was some sort of snafu that required one of the two people who were going to set up this morning to go do something else. So as I'm waking up at 7:30, 7:40 this morning, I hear my phone ding, and it's one of my league members like, "Hey, could you come help set up?" Because I don't live that far. They're actually this year they held the Pride over at Soldiers Grove, which is on the east side of the Capitol building. Because normally we have it along the riverfront, and it's usually only like a couple of blocks from me. But there's been so much rain and so much flooding, they decided not to hold it down there, and they moved it at the last minute. They had to because there were a lot of concerns of the Susquehanna is still kind of like semi-rising, and it's high. It's really up. So we had it over in Soldiers Grove, and it was really nice. But everything was done like last minute. And so I got over there a little after 9 and began the process of helping set things up. And I came home finally at 2:30. I said, I got to go home. I've been 5 hours. I was on my feet talking Derby stuff. I mean, I still got my gear on, sweaty gear from standing out kind of in the semi-sun. And yeah, it was good. I just had a bowl of noodles. I'm hydrating. It was good. I had a good time. But I was in the middle of filming this when I got messages like, "Hey, I'm heading over there now. Can you meet us? Can you meet me?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm on my way." It looks like I got a little bit of sun on my nose there. You can kind of see it. So yeah, hey, I'm always here. Always the go-to girl, especially when it comes to Derby. Maybe one of these days they'll let me play. That's on me. It's last Saturday when I was doing this, I was pretty bad. I was pretty down, I admit. And going into the beginning of the week, I was still kind of down. I did not go to my bout review for one of various reasons. A couple of reasons, but I decided not to go. And I talked with one of my coaches, Ariel, who's also my teammate, but she coaches fresh meat as well. And I had a 2-hour talk with her, and I told her some of the things that were really bothering me, and nothing to do with coaching or players or anything like that, just generally how I was feeling. And after she got done, she kind of talked me down. She kind of got me squared away. One of the things that she pointed out, she's like, "So are you just going to play one game and then quit? Is that all you really want to do?" I was like, "Well, no, I want to play." So she says, "Well, why give up?" She says, "So you only play 1 or 2 games at the end of the season." She goes, "That's it. Then there's next season." So I'm still fighting to get onto the roster, and I'm going to keep fighting. And who knows? It's going to come. Actually, the other day I was like looking at tutorials, how to skate faster. I don't know what to do. I need to learn how to skate faster. I think a lot of it is just I've got to push myself. I limit my own abilities. I don't know what I can do if I have to. I did once. I remember one time when I actually pushed myself and came in second in a race that I actually should have won because the guy who beat me, it was a race, it was a race walk, and he was cheating. We discovered later. Famously, yeah, he crossed the finish line, and when they showed the picture of him crossing the finish line, it's like both of his feet are not on the ground. It was obvious he actually like ran across the line. I was like, did no one not say anything to this guy when he went across the line? So yeah, I felt good about that. I would have won that race if it hadn't been for his cheating ass. Yeah, it seems to be me all the time. If it hadn't been for his cheating ass, I'd have won. There was another race I would have won once, but my first wife, who happened to be there at the race, and I was like, oh God, why are you even here? She wanted to come to the race, and I parked the car along the side of a road because it was in an area where there wasn't a lot of parking, and she decided that the car had to be moved to this area where it says restricted parking. And I was like, I can't move the car there. It's restricted parking. Yeah, you can move it there. So she kept bitching and bitching and bitching to get me to move the car. Finally, I moved the car, and somebody else moved their car there. We had our gear together. And just as the race is starting, somebody came along and said, if your car is still here in 5 minutes, we're going to tow it. So I actually had to step out of the race as they whistled it to go. Get my keys from somebody else's car. They had to drop out of the race. And we had to move our cars. Well, by the time we got everything done, these guys are like 5 minutes down the road. I was just like, let's go home. I was pissed. I mean, I was just like furious pissed. And a couple of friends that were racing with me, they could tell. I was just like ready to start killing people. I was that furious. And I'll never forget, I kept saying, I knew who was there at the race. Everybody who was there at the race, I had beaten before. A couple of people who I could not beat were not there. So I was like, yeah, I really had a good shot at winning this race. And the people, even later, the people who were with me that had to drop out, they even said the same thing. They said, yeah, you had a real good shot at winning this race. Well, my first wife, she had to keep poking the beehive with a stick. And she finally said something like, I mean, I'm just like gripping the steering wheel and trying not to say anything. And finally she just goes, you probably wouldn't have won anyway. And I said, if you want to walk home, open your fucking mouth one more time, and I will pull over, push you out of the car, and drive off. And if you think I'm bullshitting you, say something. Just say something. And she shut up the rest of the way home, which was about 20 minutes driving. She did not say another word the rest of the way home because she could tell I was ready to snap the steering wheel off. I was ready to snap the steering wheel off. I mean, I was that pissed. I was. They could tell. The kids in the back were just like, not saying a word. So yeah, I know what I can do when I push myself, and I need to push myself. I really do. I even said I did like a 5-minute skate, and I did not push myself, and I got close to 25 laps, 24 and a half actually. And I was like, I didn't even push myself. Which also, one thing I heard Ariel say something, and I actually kind of stopped. I started coasting, and she's like, what are you doing? I would have gotten 25 laps easy. So, but again, I wasn't pushing myself at all. And that's the thing. When I'm doing that, I don't really feel, I don't know how hard to push myself. That's the thing. It's just like they tell you you're supposed to feel comfortable when you're doing it. Well, when I'm doing it, I'm doing like 25 and a half laps and stuff. I really do have to push myself to get to 27. And people tell me, well, no, you shouldn't have to. Well, I do. I'm sorry. I'm not a fast skater, and I don't know how to go faster. I really don't. So I'm working on it, but it's a mystery to me. So what about writing? Yeah, what about writing? Oh man, writing has, I still have not gotten back in the mood of writing. Um, I haven't touched anything. I haven't done any writing. I mean, seriously, other than that outlining I did a few weeks ago, I have not done any writing. I just do not have the impetus to actually sit down and start writing. One of the things I have been doing a lot of recently is like going over like old stories, this old story ideas I had in my head. And look at this, I'm like all cozy. One of the things I'm going over is way, way back in the late 80s, early 90s when I first started writing. One of the things I worked on in a writer's group was I worked on a story based on a game environment, and not a video game environment, a tabletop RPG. And it was based off of the game Cyberpunk 2020, which was one of my favorite games. I always loved that game. I love futuristic dystopia. Yeah. Now that we're only 2 years away from the year 2020, and we get to see, like, well, what was the world like then? Well, it was pretty shitty. It was like, Blade Runner on steroids. It really was. But I love that game. I used to run stuff all the time in that. It was one of my favorite. It was bloody as hell too. It was one of those games where if you're a GM and your players are getting on your nerves, you don't even have to work hard at killing them. And seriously, just have them be at a bar some night and all of a sudden, a bunch of psychos with high-powered rifles decide to just burst it and kill everyone in sight, which is stuff that could happen in Cyberpunk. That was the great thing about it. Yeah, death and destruction. It was a great thing. But yeah, funny thing was with that game one night, I used to play I work out these intricate stories, Used to have fun with that. And one night, the players, several of them started bitching that there wasn't enough killing. They hadn't seen enough action of late, and they were getting bored, because Cyberpunk is all about, who's got the big guns and who's going to blow shit up. At least that's what they thought. And actually, about that time I had like 7 players, and 4 of them were like, yeah, we need to get into something. So I was like, okay, you guys want some action? I'll give you some action. And I just like out of nowhere pulled out like the worst shit in the world that you could think of. I mean, it was just like nonstop fighting your way out of, like fighting your way through North Korea or something. It was just insane. I plopped them down in the middle of somewhere, and they had to basically they were running out of ammunition. It got down to the point because I even told them when it dropped out. I says, "Tell me how much ammo you have." And right then they knew that oh shit, this is bad. And one guy tried telling me he's carrying 500 rounds of ammo, in 30-round clips. And I was like, do you have any freaking idea how much 500 rounds of ammo ways. And actually, he didn't. And I was like, well, let's figure this out. And we did. We figured it out. It's like, when it was all done, it's like, okay, so you want to be lugging around all this weight? You go right ahead. So he actually threw 500 rounds of ammo in 30 to 35 round clips in a backpack and lugged that around along with combat armor. And I finally got to the point where I started making him do endurance checks, strength checks, endurance checks, and he started failing them. You know, it was like, you know, you're lugging all this shit around. He did. He kept going, well, I'm blowing off a lot of ammo, so it's getting lighter. I said, yeah, but you're tired. I mean, do you understand, like, having to deal with recoil all the time? I would actually bring stuff up like that. You know, it'd be like, you know, if you're rocking and rolling on your weapons all the time, and I was rolling for like malfunctions and stuff, jams, because it's like, you can't keep, you know, like blowing off 100 rounds of ammo continuously and not have your barrel get hot or overheat or something like that. It was hilarious. I mean, you know, I was having him do all these different endurance checks. I was having, you know, checking for malfunctions on their weapons for jams, because it's like, well, you've shot off like 250 rounds of ammo in just like the last three, you know, just like the last 20 minutes. Yeah, you know, that gun of yours, it's gonna need a cleaning. They all survived, but basically I was told we never want to do that again. Really, they were just like, we don't want to do that again. We don't ever allow us. If we ever start bitching about, oh, there's not enough action, just ignore us. Because I even said that, yeah, I go, so did you get enough action for the night? And they were all just like, Jesus, everybody was shot at least once. You know, everybody had bullet wounds. Everybody had their best armor blown to pieces. There were, if I remember correctly, there were like 3 players that had taken so much damage to their armor that it was completely useless. They had to buy new armor when it was all said and done. Yeah, one guy was, it had been penetrated so much, he was like, oh my God, you know, I can't take another shot. And it was just like, your Kevlar armor is just like crap now. It's tissue paper. You've taken so many blows. And I said, and even then, everybody was walking wounded, because it's like blunt force trauma from bullets hitting your chest. I don't give a shit. You got to have hard armor on. And even then, it's going to hurt. Yeah, they learned the hard way. Don't go, we're not getting enough action. So anyway, I actually wrote a couple of stories based in that world. And 2 of them had anime-influenced characters in them. Yes, they did. One story I wrote was, it dealt with a bunch of police in an area in the southern part of the city that was used as the gaming center for the game. And it dealt with, they're having to deal with a couple of mercenaries, female mercenaries, who were big fans of Kei and Yuri, the Lovely Angels, who, if you know anime, they're also known as the Dirty Pair. And they lived up to that reputation of, we tend to blow shit up. And they did. They blew shit up left and right. And the whole story dealt with how the police were basically scrambling the entire time to like stay a step ahead of these girls, which they didn't do very well. And then I wrote another one, which I never completed. I never completed the story, but I wrote another story that dealt with some of the characters from the original story that I wrote having to go to Tokyo and encountering some supernatural shit where they encountered members of the police force from the manga and anime Silent Mobius, which actually is one of my favorite mangas. I've got all of the original Japanese mangas, no translations. I actually had translations on a computer and printed them out so I could like read the manga and then there's a translation there. But it's one of my favorite mangas. And I created all these characters from the manga and put them into my story and actually used them in a game. They were pretty badass. And I had to come up with rules for magic for the game, because they have a couple of magic users. So I had to actually invent for Cyberpunk 2020. I had to invent magic rules and how they could use them. And it was interesting because shit was getting blown up again, left and right. It was fun. But I've been actually thinking a lot about that stuff that I wrote way back then. Mostly because that really was my first venture into writing. And as I seem to recall, the first story I wrote was around 35,000 words. I mean, it was an example of me being wordy as hell, as I always am. The second story, which I never finished, I actually crapped out on it right around 38,000 words or so, if I remember correctly. And I know it was going to go a lot longer. I probably was looking at like 50,000 words to complete it. And it's one of those things where I was sitting there going, I should actually just like plot this out. Because I actually do miss writing stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. It was interesting. It was almost like fan fiction, if you think about it in that sense. And I've never been really good at writing fan fiction. I've always kind of felt it's easier to write your own world, or really you should write your own world. I don't have a problem with fan fiction. Let's just put it this way. I know that there are some writers who would say, don't do any fan fiction. You can't. Don't bring your characters into my world, or don't ship characters that don't need shipping in my world. I mean, in a sense, my Foundation Chronicles actually sort of arose out of a kind of fan fiction because the characters originally showed up in a Harry Potter role play. So in a way, it developed from fan fiction, but I had to take it and put it into my own world. That was the thing. I remember when Tanya, who created Annie, kept saying, you need to write this. And I said, well, I can't write it in the Harry Potter world because that is plagiarism, you can't use the Harry Potter world for this. I said, I basically have to develop my own world. And that was one of the things that I got into some heavy world building. But the thing I had to do, especially when I was running games, especially with Cyberpunk, I had to come up with so many different things. I had to come up with different timelines and different rules. I used a lot of the core elements of the game, but I was writing a story essentially through the game that didn't necessarily follow everything in the game. So I was kind of writing my own stuff and making it work. It was a lot of fun. It was really where I learned world building. I learned how important it is. Especially when I was doing the story and the campaign that I did for Cyberpunk utilizing characters from Silent Mobius, because I had to take those characters out of their world and put them in mine, which meant I had to take the abilities that they had in their world and give them statistics that would work in mine. So I kind of, like I said, I kind of actually developed a magic system. It was based on something else that had been, another supplement that had been written that would have allowed you to bring things like vampires and stuff into Cyberpunk. And actually, at one point, I did have a character who was a vampire. So they knew that this sort of stuff existed. But magic using, that was interesting because I had to develop like gear, I had to develop weapons, I had to develop how different spells, how they worked. And I actually had to develop the stats for a living sword. Yeah. That was fun. And it is interesting. If you do any sort of role playing, and I mean tabletop role playing, I'm not talking about getting on a computer and doing that sort of stuff. If you do any sort of tabletop role playing, you begin to learn how to world build, especially if you're not following shit in the core books and the supplements, basically word for word. I really first got into that when I was running a Battletech MechWarrior game. That was actually the first big campaign I ever put together. And since so many of my players knew the world inside and out, because they had actually come from a Battletech / MechWarrior role-playing group before they got to me. So I had all this stuff, all the supplements, and I knew the history of the worlds and stuff like that. And I basically sat down and said, I've got to change this so these guys never have any idea what's coming at them. And I did. That was really the first time where I took an existing world and I began manipulating it so that it became my world. And they even said, I ran it for 2.5 years, and a lot of my players even said it was the best game they had ever been in, because even though they knew these characters, and even though they knew some of the worlds, and they knew some of the situations, they never knew what was coming next. That was the thing that was so interesting about it, is that they never knew what was coming next. And they said that was what made it interesting, because they had played so much MechWarrior up to that point that it had gotten boring, because they knew they were going to run into, the possibility they were going to run into some of this stuff, and there was going to be a war that was going to happen here. And I moved everything around so much that it was all brand new to them, and they loved it. And that's one of the things, I can say, if you ever want, take a chance, take a shot at role play, especially from the point of view of being a GM. You learn how to world build. You have to learn how to world build, and that can start moving back toward stories that you're writing. Because once you learn how to world build in games, you can begin to learn how to world build in your novels as well. And if you're running a long campaign, if you're running long story arcs, you have to know how to plot that shit out. You have to know how to work characters in. You have to know how to move people around the map, how to get from point A to point B. It's all about world building. It's all about your characters. And it's all about creating a usable story. So that's the one thing I learned from role playing, is how to actually develop characters and write stories. There you are. Words of wisdom. And in that instance, a little bit of, fan fiction doesn't hurt. It actually helps. Well, I've talked for almost a half hour. I think that's a pretty good time. I hope you have a good weekend. I'll see you later. Bye.